Hello, my name is Stephen Tucker, and I chose to do a presentation on Chapter 4, and it was entitled Differences in Culture. So, hopping right in, the first question asked, you are preparing for a business trip to Brazil, where you will need to interact extensively with local professionals. As a result, you want to collect information about the local culture and business practices prior to your departure. A colleague from Latin America recommends that you visit the Brazil page on GlobalEdge and read through the country insights and data available. Prepare a short description of the most striking cultural characteristics that may affect business interactions in this country. So, the three most striking culture differences between Brazil and the US that I chose were under the categories of interruption, punctuality, and negotiations. So, the first striking cultural difference between Brazil and the United States, and is probably the most significant, is the concept of interruption. So, typically in the United States, when you interrupt someone, it is considered rude and disrespectful, especially in a business setting. However, in Brazil, Brazilians tend to express their feelings, their opinions more freely, and it is normal, if not encouraged, to interrupt someone while they are talking because it's seen as a sign of enthusiasm, as opposed to being rude. However, this interruption does not apply to all Brazil, because in northern Brazil, conversations are usually more closed and formal than in the southern cities of Brazil. Another striking cultural definition is that in the United States, punctuality is seen as something very, very important within business as well as social settings. In Brazil, however, time is viewed as something that is flexible, and instead of putting emphasis on time and scheduling, they tend to put more emphasis on people, relationships, and just getting the business done, the completion of business. So that rather than a rigid set schedule that should be strictly followed. The next and last striking cultural difference between Brazil and the US is under the topic or concept of negotiations. So, a tip for negotiations between an outside person, which would be like a foreigner, like the person visiting, is to hire local lawyers and accountants, because Brazilians may resent outside legal presence. And then another tip to add on is that you need to take your time when interacting with business in Brazil, business people in Brazil, because they tend to take more time and review all the details before making a decision. So those were the three most striking cultural differences between Brazil and the US. So on to the next slide. Okay, so the next question says, typically cultural factors drive the differences in business etiquette encountered during international business travel. In fact, Middle Eastern cultures exhibit significant differences in business etiquette when compared to Western cultures. Prior to leaving for your first business trip to the region, a colleague informed you that GlobalEdge can help you, as can a GlobalEdge promoted guide titled Business Etiquette Around the World. Identify 5 tips regarding business etiquette in the Middle Eastern country of your choice. So, the country that I chose was Israel. And so as you can see, the first tip that I chose was punctuality. So, unlike Brazil, where time is seen as something flexible, it is not in Israel because punctuality for a meeting is very crucial to starting off the interaction just right. Though, like most meetings, the previous meeting may run longer than expected, and you will probably have to wait 10 to 15 minutes, but it is always, especially in Israel, but always better to be earlier than late, especially in Israeli business. The next tip was small talk, and so also unlike Brazil, there is usually little to no time for small talk because Israelis tend to get down to business rather quickly. So keeping this in mind, the meetings tend to not last as long because the focus is on completing the task at hand and then moving on to the next one. So I guess due to this, the meeting agenda is followed pretty closely, and very few, if any, tangents, like getting off track, off topic, are likely to occur. The next tip was speech. So Israelis, I guess the thing to keep in mind is that Israelis are very direct to the point where foreigners and other people and just a lot of other people, mostly foreigners, find them to be quite blunt. However, this is just a part of their culture, and Israelis are known to be a very warm people group. They are open, very honest, but direct, and they tell you what they are thinking and how they feel. So this way of communication should not be seen as rude, rather inviting, really. So the fourth tip was like business culture in most places, it's pretty common practice to give a handshake when greeting someone. However, in Israel, it is important to keep in mind that if you are interacting with a religious person, whether it be Judaism or Islam, that it is not permitted to shake the hand of a member of the opposite sex. So don't be offended if they tell you no, refuse you, all that stuff. And it is probably a good thing to be aware of this custom prior to your departure to the country, to pretty much save face, I would say. And the last tip was that, I guess as I previously said, Israelis are a very hospitable people group and may take offense when you do not accept an invitation. But so if a meeting is, for instance, arranged over a meal at someone's house, there is, I guess, one key thing to keep in mind, among other things, but one key thing to keep in mind is that it is common for Israelis to offer you more food than you can eat. So it is important to be grateful and compliment the chef without forcing yourself to overreact. So that's the 5 tips, and this was just a small yet summarized list of tips. Probably the 5 main ones that I found to effectively navigate the business etiquette of the Middle Eastern country of Israel. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.